I'm Helen Haynes. My father was a prisoner of war in Changi in Singapore. His name was Ernest Victor Haynes. He was born on the 12th of November 1919. He was named Victor because he was born a day after the date of the amnesty of the First World War. He was in Changi from the day that the Japanese took it over to the day that they left. And he helped build the airport there, the runways. And I know that he used to work on the trucks, mending them. And very few stories. One of the stories I remember him telling me was that they used to go up the palm trees. They weren't allowed to. The Japanese soldiers weren't allowed to either. But the Japanese soldiers would let them because they would bring down dates. One day, the higher Japanese soldiers were coming, and so the soldiers shouted, get down from the trees. My father slipped, and it burnt all the front of his chest. It took ages to heal because every time it started to heal, Japanese soldiers would kick him in the back so that he'd stand up straight, and then it would split the scar that was beginning to heal. And I can remember seeing the scars even when he was older. They were still there. He told me that just for fun, the Japanese would decide to beat a certain amount of people, or it could be a minor discretion that had happened. So the British commander of the base told the Japanese that it had to be done in a certain way to fulfil British rules, and that they would go in order of tallest to smallest, and that was so that the Japanese would use all their force on the stronger members of the soldiers before they got to the weaker ones at the end of the line, and in that way they saved lives, basically. That's what he said. I went to Changi Jail in the 1980s, part of a backpacking trip to Australia, and I took a few pictures, not many, and there was my dad called it a malaria ditch around the outside of Changi prison. He said we used to go into this ditch because that's where the snakes would be. And so they used to catch snakes, and then they would obviously use them as food to supplement their very poor rice dishes that was their basic diet. So yeah, and they used to dry it. They used to bury it and dry it and then sprinkle it on top of the rice. I'm sure it was delicious. When the Japanese knew that they were losing, there were all kinds of stories going around that they were going to be shot, all the prisoners were going to be shot. So my father and his best friend, they escaped from the camp and they went into the town of Singapore, and the Postmaster of Singapore, he hid them for 2 days. And after the Japanese disappeared, they came out, and from then on, they kept in contact till the late 1950s. And I read letters from him where he said that he was sending rice over to my parents because he knew that there was still rationing going on in Britain. And I thought that was just lovely.
And you want to go and see the Postmaster's house?
Yes, I want to try. I've got the address. I would like to try and go there. And in the hope that maybe somebody in the area may know the family. After they were released by the Postmaster, they were wandering around Singapore, and they came across this soldier who was wandering around with maps and a pencil and a clipboard. And he said, I'm part of the advance party, and I've come ashore to mark all the roads so we know where we can disembark and where the camp is, etc. So my dad and his friend told him, drew maps, helped him draw the maps of the roads up to Changi Jail and the prisoner of war camps that were in the area. And that was that. And then in early 1950s, at a Buffalo's meeting, which is a men's club, this chap stood up and told the story of how he had met these two soldiers in Singapore when he was there as the advance party to draw the maps. And my dad was in the audience, and he stood up and said, that was me. And from that day on, they were friends for the rest of their lives. And in fact, his wife was my godmother. and he was the godfather of my brother. Yeah, so that was a lovely story. So when my dad died, I found a photograph of a Japanese soldier, and on the back it had some writing. So I asked my mum if she knew what this was, and she said, oh, it's a Japanese soldier that I believed helped your father in Changi. This man must have been very important to him, and they obviously had some kind of connection. And I don't know what that is, I'll never know. I'm so sort of sad that I could never ask him about it. And I thought I'd like to find out a bit more about this soldier if I could. But I only have things to think of his father. So we're going out in October this year, which will be amazing. And it would just be nice to know a little bit about his father. The only thing I do know about him was that apparently before he died, he had nightmares about the war. He had trouble sleeping, and it was the same with my father. So there is a common sort of theme there. I feel in a way that this trip in October for me is fulfilling what he wanted me to do. He asked if I would go on one of these reconciliation trips in the 1990s, I believe, 1980s. But it was the wrong time for me. I wasn't interested. Had he talked about Japan, I might have thought about going, and I might have more information, which would have been helpful. So I heard a story from my nephew who was doing a project at school about the Second World War, who spoke to my father about his time in the war and what he felt about the Japanese. And he told him a story about when he first came back to Britain, he worked in the post office. People came in and said, there's a load of Japanese people outside. So he apparently went outside and he berated them and said, I had a terrible time in Singapore. You were terrible to us. You killed lots of my friends. And one of the Japanese men turned around to him and said, we may have done that to you, but you killed my father. And from then on, he said, Mark, my nephew, said that my dad had said to him that he thought of two sides of war. Before that, it had only been thinking about him as a soldier. He'd never really thought about the other side of it. And maybe that's why he never talked about Japan again, because he realised that there was another side to this war and therefore didn't talk about it. I've never really I don't think there's anything for me to forgive because I'm a different generation. It didn't really affect me. To be truthful, not really thought about the Japanese until, as I say, I came across this photograph and thought, yeah, I'd like to know a bit more.
Do you think reconciliation is important?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm not sure it's reconciliation, it's just accepting of other people and their cultures and our differences and trying to understand that. I mean, reconciliation to me is something that you've got to almost forgive the other side for, whereas I don't really see, it was war. That's just what it was in those days. So before he went, he wrote a poem, which I've checked on Google because I couldn't believe that he'd written it. It's called Till Our Partings Are Over. Till we come to that day when our partings are over, till our hopes and our wishes come true, I shall carry the thrill of those days spent together and a future all centred in you. Till the things that divide us forever are ended and these troublesome days all depart, in my thoughts your dear face will be always beside me, your love ever locked in my heart. And it's signed Ernie. I'm very proud of him, yeah. He was a very quiet man. He wasn't, he's very generous to me, probably more than my brothers. And yeah, I just really enjoyed his company. And he's been dead a long time, but I still miss him, yeah. And this is my way of sort of keeping his memory alive. And I hope through doing this, it means that our daughter and his other grandchildren and their children as well will keep it alive.